Welcome to an online content webcast for kindergarten that is intended to provide teachers and those who support them in the classroom with background information as a foundation on the intended standards being addressed specifically in this presentation. This webcast will focus on several kindergarten standards beginning with two of the winter holidays, specifically Christmas and New Year's Day. Notice the verbs identify and describe in this standard. Teachers will be able to observe students' understanding of these standards as they are encouraged to orally communicate as they analyze and investigate the use of primary source images from the time period that each holiday was established. Identify these two national holidays and describing the people and/or events surrounding them also ties in nicely with geographic understandings by explaining the customs and celebrations of families and communities on these holidays. This standard relates to the culture of groups of people and in showing students how people think and feel about the importance of these holidays. You'll also want to discuss how a group of people act and celebrate these national holidays in our country. This provides students with an example of how we are a special group in our country and in our local communities. Teachers will need to continue to discuss and model for students throughout this study how the specific holidays are celebrated as a special event on the designated days in December and again in January. A learning target for students in this standard is I Can Tell About Christmas. This holiday is celebrated every year on the 25th of December in the United States of America. Within this standard, focus on the fact that not all people celebrate the same holidays, and if they do celebrate Christmas time, families may celebrate Christmas time in different ways. Some lessons for this standard might include, what does celebrate mean? Read and talk about what happens when people celebrate. They may throw rice at weddings, yell and jump around when they win a game, put up and decorate trees for Christmas, have cakes and ice cream for birthdays, or give gifts to mothers and fathers on Mother's and Father's Day. Also, talk about what time of year some of these celebrations happen. What celebration happens in the winter, specifically in December? Use this as a time to review months of the year on a calendar. Finally, what kinds of things do families do to celebrate Christmas? What other holidays do families celebrate at this time of year or throughout the year? The two primary sources on this slide show two traditional images of Christmas for many people. Stockings and trimmings on a tree, as well as lights decorating a house, are images that come to mind for many when we think of Christmas time. A learning target for students in this standard is I Can Tell About New Year's Day. This holiday is celebrated every year on January 1st in the United States of America. Now for some background knowledge about this holiday. The first New Year's Day can be dated back to around 45 BC when Julius Caesar created the Julian calendar. In many countries, New Year's celebrations actually begin on December 31st and continue into the hours of January 1st. We typically view New Year's Day as a day of new beginnings. Resolutions are often made at this time. Some other New Year's Day traditions include watching fireworks and staying up until midnight to watch the ball drop in Times Square. Cities across our own country have adopted their own version of the ball drop, such as the peach drop in Atlanta each year. Many people also believe eating black-eyed peas and greens on New Year's Day will bring them money and luck to last the whole year through. The primary source on the left shows a photograph that was taken in Times Square during the ball drop. Notice the crowds and excitement. The primary source on the right shows a magnificent fireworks display that might be seen on such occasion. Some questions that you might pose to your students after viewing these primary sources might be, how are the traditions that go along with New Year's Day alike and different from the traditions that are associated with other holidays? How does your family celebrate New Year's? This slide shows a few possible read-alouds for kindergarten about New Year's Day. The first two books shown are informational and are rich in vocabulary. The last book, The Night Before New Year's, is written in poetic form and is a great resource to use when comparing texts with same and different structures on the same topic. Even though this book isn't written as an informational text, there is still valuable work that can be done within the story. Teachers may also refer to how things change over time while others stay the same. How did the two previous primary sources differ? Allow opportunities for comparisons to be made with students using vocabulary of the standards, such as now and long ago, to make connections to how things change and how other things stay the same. This also reinforces for young learners a historical understanding by comparing life in the past to life today, and encourages discussion about possible ideas and questions about how these events and holidays have developed over time. The chart on this slide shows one example of a way to analyze a primary source. I use this chart weekly in my room. I show a primary source. My students know that they cannot shout out responses. At first, they simply notice everything they can possibly see on the primary source. It might be as detailed as the clothing someone is wearing, or as broad as noticing the landscape. I call on students to say what they see until we have exhausted the list. Next, students focus on what they think. When they respond, they must start with the words, "I think." Students have to be taught to be respectful of others' opinions. We can disagree, but we still respect all possible responses. Finally, students are asked, "What do you wonder?" This question is the most challenging prompt. Students must think about what they know and build on it. After students have had an opportunity to share, I give them background information on the primary source. In the beginning, I had to heavily model appropriate responses for my students. After several weeks, my students were able to independently think through this entire process. Standard SSKG1 asks students to describe the diversity of American culture by explaining the customs and celebrations of various families and communities. We want students to recognize that even though we all live in the United States, we may have different traditions in our own families compared to those of other families. We don't want any child to feel as if one tradition is preferred over another. Our country welcomes diversity, and we want to teach our students to welcome it too. A learning target for students in this standard is I can describe the diversity of American culture. It can be easy for a child to only view the world from their experiences and traditions. In order for students to be able to describe the diversity of American culture, we have to first expose them to different customs and traditions. In my school, we take our students on a journey around the world to teach them about different holidays that are celebrated around the world and in America because of our diverse nation. Students are given a passport and then travel from room to room or holiday to holiday and experience firsthand food, traditions, games, and vocabulary surrounding different winter holidays. This journey reinforces to students that our differences are to be celebrated and embraced. The primary source on the left shows a photograph of a menorah that would be used during Hanukkah. The primary source in the center shows a family celebrating Kwanzaa. The primary source on the right shows a child opening a gift on Christmas morning. Some questions that you might pose to your students after viewing these primary sources might be, how are these holidays alike and different? Does your family have any of these same traditions? This slide shows a few possible read-alouds for students in kindergarten about celebrating the diversity of American culture. The first two listed are about 2 winter holidays. You and Me Together, Moms, Dads, and Kids Around the World is a wonderful introduction to children and parents about our differences around the world. The text is simple and the photographs are stunning. How My Family Lives in America tells the stories of 3 children in America who represent different cultural traditions. Due to the text complexity and length, this book might need to be shared in several excerpts instead of at one sitting. Please remember that these are not mandated titles, but instead suggestions. Another standard that we will cover in this domain is in the domain of economics. Standard SSKE4 asks students to explain that people must make choices because they cannot have everything they want. This standard ties in perfectly with the Christmas standard and other holiday standards because students will be able to relate it to deciding what they want most for Christmas. Students are probably well aware that they do not get everything that they ask for on their Christmas list, so they have to choose what they want the most. Relating this standard to this common idea will help give them a foundation of understanding to build on. This standard is asking students to explain the idea of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost refers to what a person must give up by making a choice for something else. While the term itself may be introduced in other grade standards, this concept is very much kindergarten appropriate. Students are faced with choices daily. When they walk in the classroom, they make a lunch choice. By choosing pizza, they must understand they are giving up hamburgers or whatever other choice is available. When choosing a library book, students understand when they choose one book, they are giving up the opportunity for another title. Bringing to mind as many real-world situations involving opportunity costs as possible will help give students a thorough understanding of this standard. The primary source on the left is an advertisement from a toy store that shows prices of various toys. Have some conversation about what choices your students would make and why. Also, discuss whether choice is causing them to give up or not choose. This ad also lends itself to telling your students they have a specified amount of money to spend. How do their choices change? What if there wasn't a limit on their spending? The primary source on the right shows customers lining up in front of an ice cream truck. Although prices aren't visible, your students can clearly see the different ice creams available. Have your students discuss what they think the customers might be thinking. What choices will they have to make, and what will they have to do without? This slide shows possible read-alouds for this economic standard. Johnny's Decisions and Alexander Who Used to Be Rich Last Sunday are written in story form, but they still teach a valuable lesson on realizing you can't have everything you want. Choices must be made. Wants versus Needs, Possessions is written as an informational text and uses vocabulary specific to this standard. A culminating activity that can be done to bring this standard to life is to have either a grade level or classroom market day. In your own classroom, have students earn their pay for being a good student for 5 days. They also have to pay for a car and house of their choice. At the end of the 5 days, students are able to purchase goods or services from other students within their classroom by using classroom money. This slide shows several pictures from our market day in my classroom. An experience like Market Day teaches students firsthand that choices must be made. They cannot have everything they want when they have a limited amount of money. Feel free to put your own spin on this Market Day concept. Thank you for viewing this online content webcast for kindergarten. The webcast is intended to provide kindergarten teachers and those who support them in the classroom with background information as a foundation on the intended standards being addressed specifically in this presentation. Be sure to look for other webcasts specific to additional GSE standards.